It's the 6th day of November, and we're the first day of the conference of parties. We're going to kind of step back to 2021 to give you some context. Hope everybody's doing good on this Sunday night. My voice is a little strained. I've been sick for 16 days. I'm getting better. Let's get after it. How's everybody doing? I'm known as Dana at Durnford, and I'm also known as the nuclearproctologist.org. Here we go. Let's get it done. The sooner it's over, the sooner I can put my head back on the pillow. Remember last year, Raphael Grossi, the head of the IAEA, was at Conference of Parties 26, and he said nobody died at Fukushima, and everybody blew up laughing at him. He replaced that guy, right? And here we go again. So, Coca-Cola is the sponsor of all people. So, pretty obvious they're not being serious if they're going to use Coca-Cola as their sponsor. Now, all aircraft are exempt from emissions. The militaries are exempt from emissions. All private jets, of course, are exempt from emissions. But to use Coca-Cola, obviously whatever they are, they're not serious about trying to do anything. This year's United Nations Climate Summit is brought to you by Coke. And if you put climate change anywhere in your descriptions or titles, United Nations will put a big stupid amount of advertising under your video. You have no say in it. And it shows you this contempt, right? When you do stuff like that. Nobody else is allowed to have a conversation, only them. So therefore, they're going to put a big banner underneath it. 2020, wind and solar was up 50%. In 2020, the global net increase in renewables was 261 gigawatts, is equal to 300 nuclear power plants coming online in 12 months. That's amazing. It dwarfs nuclear's capacity. So those who argue we need to construct more nuclear to beat the climate emergency are clearly wrong. And the argument is pretty easy to make, that nuclear is the reason we have climate runaway. Explain that hopefully later. In 2021, so in 2020 was 260 gigawatts of renewables, and 99% of that was wind and solar, which is equal to 300 nuclear power plants. In 2021, it was 290 gigawatts of renewables came online. That's 550 gigawatts in just 48 months. So air travel industry's emissions fall outside the scope. Now this was last year. I got to cover a few of these headlines from last year to try to give you context, because they haven't mentioned it so far this year. So air travel emissions they fly very high. They leave huge trails that block out the sun. for extended periods, obviously. We've seen one extreme out in British Columbia where the contrails from the planes had blocked out the sun for 174 straight days. I documented that myself. The military is exempt. They don't have to report on their emissions. And of course, their bombs should be included. Their submarines should be included. Their endless ships and tanks and 900 bases worldwide. This is just one military, the American I'm talking about. So when you stack up, what's the carbon footprint of Ukraine? What was the carbon footprint of Iraq and Afghanistan, where they fired 5.5 million rounds a month? The U.S. Department of Defense is the largest institutional consumer of fossil fuel in the world. No checks and balances, period. They want your tin cans and pop bottles and cardboard and claim you're the bad guy for being alive. So nuclear, and most people recycle, for goodness sakes. We're the good people. We're the good part of the planet. So not because of the recycling, but because we're conscious of things. Not like the militaries. And so nuclear testing has changed the Earth's atmosphere. Now, I had another story. I was preparing some of this documentation on it, and this showed up, never showed up. This is in my bookmarks from last year or the year before. I forgot about it. I can't remember putting it there. We cover tens of thousands of headlines on nuclear each year, so no big surprise. Nuclear tests changed the Earth's atmosphere. The bombs dropped into the atmosphere alone accounted for 428 megatons, which is equal to 29,000 Hiroshima bombs going off. So is 29,000 Hiroshima bombs a nuclear war? Because in the 40s, 2 of them were considered a nuclear war. How about 29,000? And so the releases from that are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. That's an incredible way of looking at it, right? Because that's still not all the bombs we're talking about. No concerns in the early years of the trials. Several trials began to show that these tests affected the environment and people. And due to growing environmental threats like radioactive fallout, the disposition, which is radioactive fallout, of a mixture of particles from the atmosphere from the explosions, covered the whole planet. In fact, we cover studies where they postulated that weapons testing changed the sex ratio of all males and females worldwide, not just humans, but all species worldwide, which is more males than females from the pollution of radioactive fallout. How 30 years of nuclear testing has poisoned the environment and the population. France has long denied responsibility for any harmful effects. So did Britain, United States, and everybody else. United States, just the Bikini Atolls was over 1 million square kilometers. It was highly radioactive. Let me bring that up just right quick because I forgot to. This was a study from 2019, and I caught it when it first came out. Radioactive fallout contamination extended over 1 million square kilometers. And it's pulsing energy every second, almost at the speed of light. And so this was Fukushima, one of the many, many models of Fukushima radioactive fallout. And this is 20 days of radioactive fallout. So this plume basically never goes away. It's a forever plume. And it's pulsing energy, gammas and alphas and neutrons and betas, almost at the speed of light every second. And they hit each other, the gammas, the alphas, the neutrons, the betas, and they don't mingle. And they change direction at the speed of light. This causes another nasty, terrible effect known as X-rays. And so all the species, particularly the insects and the biotas, the fungus and the bacteria of your planet, are getting full X-rays constantly every second from it. And you can't perceive it, you can't see it or taste it or hear it or feel it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. Another big polluter you might want to think about is container ships. One mass of container ships equal 50 million cars of pollution. 50 million cars. And so the world's 15 biggest ships create more pollution than the 760 million cars worldwide. 15 ships. There's currently around 90,000 of these ships on the ocean at any given time. And there's many, many being built. So if you take 90,000 and divide it by 15, which is equal to all the cars on the planet, you have 6,000. So the shipping pollution is equal to 6,000 civilizations, 42 trillion people worth of automobiles. 760 million cars. 760 million times 6,000 is 4.5 trillion cars on the planet of pollutions from the shipping industry. They're exempt too, of course. So the biggest polluters, the massive polluters are all conscious free. They don't have any monkey on their back whatsoever. So 7 million people times 6,000 lots of ships, 15 ships, is equal to all the pollution from all the automobiles on the planet, which is equal to 42 trillion people, basically, on this planet every day, caused by the ships worth of pollution. They're exempt, the military is exempt, air travel is exempt, Coca-Cola is exempt. Okay, so you can't have this conversation without thinking about global warming, climate change, carbon footprint, and what's the other one? We'll get to it. An interview with the father of global warming, which is Wallace Brocker. So in 1975, he put out a paper, and that has been used to beat up the civilian population of the planet permanently. But in 1975, there was not just Soviet Union nuclear testing going on. There was, from all countries, were blown up nuclear weapons like it was popcorn. List of nuclear weapons testing is just mind-boggling. 2,476 nuclear devices, But Soviet Union's biggest one was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki plutonium-type bombs going off at the one time. 3,800. So the radioactive fallout, now they claimed because they blew it up above ground there wasn't much radioactive fallout, but we know better than that from all the studies over the years. It was huge radioactive fallout. As of 1993, worldwide, 520 atmospheric nuclear explosions, 545 megatons, 545,000 kilotons, divided by Nagasaki, 15 kilotons, is 36,000 Nagasaki bombs worth of radioactive fallout. 36,000. Is that a nuclear war? Or am I just being picky? Miles Allen. He's the physicist behind net zero. He's got a nice cushy job at Oxford. And so he wrote a paper, and then the word net zero, United Nations seized up on all of these papers. So last year he put out a letter in the Eco Times, a letter to the school strikers from the physicists behind net zero. That was a really low blow, wasn't it? A letter to the children who don't know any better. I've been described as the physicist behind net zero, he said. Keep our skies blue, take back your CO2, and good luck. He's the director of Oxford Net Zero, University of Oxford. So he wrote this paper, and got a nice cushy job at Oxford, and then the arrogance and the hubris to publish something like that. So you got net zero and global warming. How about carbon footprint? Well, that came from BP Oil. BP Oil had a major accident, polluted a huge coastline. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP in 2005, where they blamed you for their accident. So then you have climate change, Dr. James Hansen. Now we can show you the videos of Hansen claiming radioactive fallout is like flying on an airplane, for instance. This is an absolute betrayal. And he got the Taiwan's equivalent of a Nobel Prize for promoting nuclear. He done a single presentation to Congress in 1988. And ever since that, he's been put on a pedestal by, you guessed it, United Nations. His testimony was an important turning point in the history of the global climate change. It was pivotal and marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debate. But there was no debate, was there? And if you try to have a debate, United Nations will put a big stupid advertisement underneath your video and try to force people to go there. The incredible hateful arrogance of United Nations knows no bounds. It's another one you might really consider, because they're promoting nuclear. Now we have a poll tonight. Will conference parties 27 years be about promoting dirty nuclear power as green again this year? And so far, I haven't seen them do it. Just like last year originally, where they just didn't go there because there's so much controversy, and rightfully so. But that But for the rest of the year, they promoted nuclear as the savior to climate change, right? The industry was there, but the media didn't quote it for the whole conference, if that's what you want to call it. It's not really a conference, right? It's the United Nations getting together for a big party. The changes to the 1990 Radiation Exposure Compensation Act would add all of Nevada, all of Arizona, all of Utah, and wants to include Colorado, Idaho, all of Montana, all of New Mexico, and all of Guam from radioactive fallout, and that everybody in these states are entitled to compensation because they were poisoned by the nuclear war they call nuclear testing. Now, nuclear is too expensive, too slow, and even the baseload argument doesn't work for nuclear. And nuclear power poses unacceptable risks and is not a climate change solution. It's too slow and costly to impact. Nuclear is climate change. And Fukushima was the straw that broke the planet's back. Good COP26, bad COP26, how protests at UN climate talks will be policed. They had 10,000 police last year in the United Kingdom. 10,000 police. And they were jacking people off the streets, just driving up in vans and snatching them and driving away, terrifying the protesters. It was absolute terrorism that was perpetrated. So we're still going to cover a little bit of 2021. There is no planet B. Well, your biggest polluter is your militaries. And Coca-Cola, who's sponsoring. It's absurd that Coca-Cola is the sponsor. It's absurd that United Nations needs a sponsor for something like this. We got lots of 2022 stuff coming up right away. Why was this a headline last year? President Joe Biden farted close to Camilla. It's just nothing but contempt, right? We see this so often, this kind of contempt, this arrogance. Opinion, nuclear power. Now, this is not an opinion. This is Michael Snyder, who writes the synopsis on nuclear each year, is recognized worldwide. Nuclear power has become irrelevant, like it or not, 2021. And the debate is over. Nuclear power has been eclipsed by the sun and the wind. Photovoltaic plants saw their electricity generating costs decrease by 90% over the last decade. 90%, wow. And wind power is down by 70%. While nuclear cost increased by a third. And a third of a lot of money is a lot of money, right? And while there was a net nuclear capacity increase of 0.4 gigawatts in 2021, renewables added 248 gigawatts for 2020. Is that 2020? No, it's 2021. I was looking back at 2020, right? China, the only country with a significant new build program, added 2 gigawatts of nuclear and 150 gigawatts of solar and wind. In other words, nuclear is literally gone, it's in quicksand. No wonder the despair is reigning in the nuclear company's headquarters. Well, let's look at Hinkley Point. Hinkley Point, they're going to use enough cement to build a sidewalk to Rome and back. which is just a fraction. So they like calling these places carbon free for some reason. I'll just take you through some pictures. It's impossible to wrap your mind around the scale of this creature and the precious metals. He used almost all the precious metals on the planet. It's the biggest construction project on the entire planet. And they're calling it carbon free for some reason. Well, that's because the industry's lunatics. This is why they're failing, is because they're so arrogant. When you look at this, it's impossible to appreciate that every scrap there has to be inspected 3 times by 3 different companies. Because they keep calling nuclear carbon free for some reason. Everything you see there is the most precious metals on the entire planet. And it's all going to be irradiated when they're finished with it on top of that. This is the water intakes. It's going to need, I'm not sure for these particular reactors, but several million gallons a minute. Every minute is going to need several million gallons. Like the precious metals we're talking about, not just, like I said, the cement, there's enough to build a sidewalk. And in the background, let me finish that. For cement, there's enough cement used to build a sidewalk to Rome and back. Look in the background, all of these farms. Now, they're building this at a current nuclear site, by the way. It has been... What makes it really unique is that the fuel pools are still hemorrhaging atoms. They're still splitting the atoms into the environment. And there's no containment anymore. We're talking absurd amount of poison in that food. It's absurd. It's criminal beyond any... I can't really compare it to anything else. It's so criminal what they're doing, actually doing. Look at all these farms in the background. If that doesn't make you shake your head in disbelief, I don't know what does. Again, it's hard to comprehend this, so I'll go a bit deeper to the story because it really is hard to comprehend the significance of this, the enormity of this facility. And it's surrounded by farms all the way up to the side of the disease factories. These are disease factories. These are, once you fill up the fuel pool with some fuel, now it's splitting the atoms into the environment. And the numbers we're talking about are stunning. The largest crane in the world is stationed at Hinkley Point, along with 100 other cranes. But the largest one in the world, that big yellow one, it took 280 trucks to bring it there. Transport trucks. 280. Just because this is day 1 of the Conference of Parties. I like to call it the constipated parties. It takes around 40 minutes for the crane to turn 360 degrees. That's another one you should look at, 75 photos of Hinkley Point, because the other pictures doesn't really do it justice. It will be the most expensive man-made object on Earth when it's finished. And they're out there screeching that it's carbon-free for years and years and years. The most expensive man-made object on Earth is a stupid nuclear power plant, and will eventually deliver low-carbon power. Like their contempt is overboard for humanity. It really is. They'll be the most expensive man-made object on Earth. And it's surrounded by farms as far as you can see. And you should see what they're doing on the waterfront. And they bring in these big rocks on these big barges. These are tunnel diggers so they can put water in, and each glass of water would have 1 billion creatures in it. And 75 to 100 million of them are the phytoplankton. This is the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon, the sequestering chain being destroyed. The numbers are shocking. It's like 32 million glasses a minute with 1 billion creatures in each glass. It's just one great big evil stupid machine. That's the water intakes. And it's still hard to appreciate the size of these things. The largest ever cement pour, 9,000 cubic meters. Enough to build a sidewalk to Rome and back. King Charles III hosts the meetings ahead of the climate summit. King Charles hosts a meeting. So he wants leaders worldwide to fly in the United Kingdom first, and Charles will tell them what to think and what to say, and then they can go to Egypt. And Egypt, of course, is very repressive. He's hosting a reception to discuss tackling climate change. About 200 politicians and campaigners meet at Buckingham Palace. 200 politicians and campaigners have to go down and bend the knee and kiss the ring. He's internationally known for climate work, and it was agreed he would not go to the Constipated Party 27 this year. Every moment we allow climate change to ravage our planet, we will see more human suffering. Now, what would King Charles know about suffering? He has 150 servants his whole life, 155 rather, servants his whole life. He's completely out of touch with reality. There's no concept of what reality actually is. Accounts of climate crisis victims underscore urgency of action. Accounts of climate crisis. So what they're trying to do, they want trillions of dollars given to United Nations, and they're going to dole out the money to people affected by climate change. But that's not United Nations' job. In fact, they've taken over our planet. Nobody's allowed to criticize them per se, have a debate, I should say, with them about what they're up to. Remember what they've done to North Korea after they were formed, right? They used to be the League of Nations, right? And they changed their name to United Nations. And one of their first acts as United Nations was they napalmed, burnt down every community in North Korea. Every community. It's collective punishment. You're attacking the civilians when you do stuff like that. They got millions and millions dead, millions and millions missing, millions and millions of refugees, millions and millions brutally wounded and disfigured. And they have land, sea, air embargoes for 70 years. And North Korea has never attacked anybody in 70 years. But United Nations, which is 195 militaries, that's all they've done. So why are they put on a pedestal? Why are they claiming to be our so-called kings and queens? And they're a bigot and racist and biased and prejudiced organization on top of that. They must commit to rapidly phasing out the use and production of fossil fuels without relying on harmful and unproven shortcuts like carbon removal mechanisms and establish a loss and damage fund to provide remedy to peoples whose rights have been violated by climate change. Well, climate change is caused by decades and decades of radioactive fallout. So you had the weapons testing, you had, which was a mass murder machine on our planet from radioactive fallout that never goes away, right? All the dumping they done for decades and decades into the oceans and everywhere else. You had 440 nuclear plants hemorrhaging radiation non-stop now into the environment from the fuel pools. This stuff is pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second for millions of years. And so they're trying to blame your tin cans and your pop bottles that don't pulse energy for millions of years or even a single time. But radiation does. And all the fuel, all the leftover materials from the production are still splitting the atoms into the environment. I don't understand why the planet won't acknowledge that this is a real issue. This is a horrific. People will say, yeah, we got to get rid of the nuclear waste, but they don't even understand what it does. It's still splitting the atoms that it would normally to power millions of homes. Now those atoms are just released into the environment all day from over 400, and what's the current number? 414 nuclear sites. Well, each one of these reactors have 2 fuel pools, plus the common spent fuel pools. So you're talking about 1,000 fuel pools worldwide, full of reactor cores splitting the atoms into the environment. And these atoms are pulsing energy almost at the speed of light every second for millions of years. Each day there's a new batch of this released into the environment that'll live for millions of years pulsing energy. And the next day there's another, just an absurd, invisible snowstorm of radioactive fallout released worldwide each day from fuel pools pulsing energy every second. If that doesn't concern you, then you're not being realistic. What's at stake for constipated parties 27 climate talks in Egypt? Climate talks. Well, this is obviously this is a scam, right? There is climate change, but it's caused by the industry, the nuclear industry. And United Nations has ERPA and UNSCLEAR and the IAEA and the IPCC, or the ICPP rather. United Nations shouldn't exist. It has no sovereignty over any country. There's participation from 195 militaries. Its entire legacy is predicated upon deceit and deception and misrepresentation and genocide and omnicide against species and humanity. What's at stake for the climate talks? A third of Pakistan flooded, Europe's hottest summer in 500 years. Just what are you going to do? Blame that on tin cans and pop bottles and cardboard, are you? When it's the nuclear industry that's causing the glaciers to melt, that's causing the pollution and the mass die-off. And, radioactive fallout causes 1,800 illnesses. Heart problems and liver problems and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome and schizophrenia. But this is true for the species. This is not just applicable to humans. UN Climate Change Conference Chartered Banker. The Institute is proud to be supporting Conference of Parties 27, bring your key content to help individuals in their different roles understand how banking can support the transition to a zero carbon economy. Zero Carbon was the paper written by Miles Allen. And so anything to demonize and vilify you and your loved ones, anything, this industry will do it. There's nothing too low for it to do. And they have a lot of people that play into it. Zero carbon economy, which is no you and all them, right? Conference of Parties 27 host accuses countries of making empty public pledges. And what like they always got to wear these stupid suits. It's like the minute you take the suit off them, they become dysfunctional. As soon as you take the suit off and they can't even tie their own shoes, their suit is the only thing holding their head up straight. It bothers me that they do that. This arrogance. Now, he's from Egypt. Egypt's probably the last place where you should wear a suit on top of that. The Egyptian diplomat in charge of running the negotiations. Really, negotiations. You're calling this negotiations? Political statements and pledges are made in front of cameras, and in the negotiating rooms, it's back to the adversarial approaches. At least 120 heads, states, and governments will gather for 2 days of discussions. So what? Like, why do they feel that they can make decisions that affect everybody else with nobody to challenge their assertions, with no checks and balances whatsoever? Because that's what this is. This is a one-sided conversation. And if you're invited, then you're in that one-sided conversation. There is no left and right. There's no balance. The UK Prime Minister is expected to attend. Well, whoopee-doo. Yay. Wow, wow, wow. Good for her. She gets elected. Her job now is to go around and shake hands. She's like, these are the most unworthy people that are going there. They're the most unworthy. They're not academics. They're not scientists. And they're just so-called useful idiots for governments. They don't have any redeeming qualities. They're not somebody you're going to remember next year or the year after. They're not somebody who's going to enlighten you. They're not somebody that has spent a lifetime studying a subject. They're hand pumpers. They're yes men and yes women. They're the opposite of what a meeting like this should be. They have zero sincerity and zero education for the topic. They're they're useful idiots for the military-industrial complex, which is United Nations. And U.S. President Joe Biden will attend. So what? Like, it's not like he's educated. Not like he's an academic. It's not like he's a scientist. It's not like anybody gives a shit what Joe Biden says. There's probably not a single person outside of that lot that gives a shit of what Joe Biden might say. His words are empty and hollow. That's his job. He doesn't think, he's told. The talks are taking place in the shadow of global upheaval owing to the Ukraine war and energy, food, and cost of living crises rising around the world because of embargoes, because self-inflicted inflation. Russia didn't cut off the world from commodities. United Nations did, and NATO countries did. They caused the inflation. They caused the misery. They caused the embargoes. And by proxy, the inflation. And the minute that they announced that in February, I posted a video, a presentation on it, saying, well, this is going to be massive inflation and it's starting in a couple of days. And of course, that's what it was, right? There's nothing but a betrayal. You can't have a future by doing stuff like that. This conference of parties can't achieve anything because they're the ones who done it to us. And now they're the solution. Is there actually people that gullible besides them? Is there actually people out there? Yes. But do they have the moral high ground? Of course not. Are they qualified to do the things they're doing? Of course not. Is that why they got the job? Of course it is. Climate finance will be a key. Now, last year they said they needed trillions and trillions of dollars. United Nations said, give us all the money you got and we'll fix it. Right? We covered this. Like last year, the Conference of Parties started on Halloween appropriately and ended 13 days later appropriately. Actual goblins. Right? Actual goblins to do something like that. Developing countries have been promised $100 billion a year. Yeah, and they want us to give United Nations, this unelected, this uncontrollable, unaccountable military-industrial complex, trillions of dollars and let them dole it out, yeah? The opposite of getting stuff done is to give the money to them. Or their subsidies, and they have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of subsidiary companies, including stuff like UNICEF, for God's sakes. Civil society participants have been concerned in the run-up to the talks that their activities will be restricted, as Egypt is an authoritarian state that clamps down on protests, which is why would you have a so-called open meeting in a place like Egypt? Why would you do something like that? How disconnected are you that you would do something like that? How out of touch with any kind of reality are you that you would do this in Egypt of all places? One of the most repressive places in that part of the country. So if you want to go there and get heard, you got to register your name. You got to give them your phone and let them go through your phone to see if you're doing anything they don't like. Where women are still not allowed to drive. So a public demonstration would be permitted. Oh, that's pretty nice of you. Wow, how nice are you? It'd be permitted, will it? But the protesters would have to register and then be accepted before they're allowed to join the march, which is going to be in a controlled little zone. You can protest, but you got to get in that little box over there. And people don't even know what they're protesting. They don't even know what the big picture is. No concept of it. War followed. Energy scramble and science warning. War followed. Was NATO and United Nations countries put embargoes against commodities from Russia and caused massive inflation that has screwed the entire planet. That has destroyed the most impoverished worldwide in every country. And there's probably no end in sight. Thanks to the United Nations. Each year there are high hopes for 2 weeks United Nations climate gathering almost an inevitably disappointment when it doesn't deliver another landmark pact like the one agreed in 2015 in Paris, which is the Climate Accord, which was an absurd betrayal. It was a ridiculous betrayal. Like, first off, France is the very last country anybody wants to take marching orders from. France is disgusting. If you just go ask the French Polynesians how disgusting France is. Ask the refugees from Niger how disgusting France actually is. France detonated over 190 nuclear weapons in one of the most impoverished places in the world and denied them any kind of recognition now for over 70 years. I absolutely despise France for what they've done to the most impoverished. A landmark pact like the 2015 Paris Accord, landmark. Again, these are about taking over your planet. That's what these landmark pacts are. It's about destroying the future of humanity, not nurturing it. Energy scramble. There was no scramble. If they didn't put an embargo against Russia from United Nations countries, we wouldn't all be starving to death all the time, would we? We wouldn't have massive inflation, would we? We got massive inflation because of United Nations, because of the betrayal. Prices for oil, coal, and natural gas have jumped since Russia's invasion. They jumped because of the embargoes by United Nations NATO countries, there was no referendum. It was just this same group of people got together and said, hey, let's put an embargo against Russia. We can screw over everybody in our countries. And they'll be too weak to resist us at our UN fabled climate change. I gotta blow my nostrils, folks. My apologies. Still trying to recover. We're getting there. Future funding needs are likely to be in the trillions, said the negotiator. Trillions. So the United Nations wants the world to give them trillions of dollars so they can help the countries that are being destroyed by radioactive fallout effects upon our planet. Way to go. Activist voices. Thunberg, Greta is not going because she's smart enough to know that's a stupid idea. Highlights of some key health events at Constipated Party 27 from the World Health Organization, which is United Nations. This is what I mean. So I'm not sure how this is going to work out for the next 2 weeks. Last year we covered it every day, but there's a lot of nuclear news. You know, I got a huge folder ready to go on nuclear news already. And so I've done 2 different shows the weekend. One on the Conference of Parties 27 and one on Fukushima and nuclear news. Ran into the ground, but that's necessary. I don't. If I was healthy, I have no issues whatsoever. I'm just still recovering. The World Health Organization, which is United Nations, will be promoting health arguments for climate action. First off, they should shut up. They are United Nations. right? They're bullies, right? And they'll come at you from all different directions from all these subsidy companies that United Nations has. It's just one great big bully, destroying our planet and the future for our children and our loved ones and the species. Getting back on track to net zero. And they have around 3,000, and we'll get to it, around 3,000 medias that are going to be there to regurgitate whatever they are told. Economic upheaval with typhoons in Bangladesh, unprecedented floods in Pakistan, heat waves in Europe, wildfires in North America, dry rivers in China, and droughts in Africa. And you can attribute this easily to all of it, right? This acceleration of cyclones and typhoons and hurricanes and droughts is directly related to Fukushima's multiple fuel pools and reactors melting down at the one time. It was they stored all their reactor cores at the top of these buildings, and they're completely lost. This is global warming on an overdrive. Unlocking capital from pension funds, the ultimate betrayal. Where they steal people's pension funds. It's absolutely despicable they would even suggest it. And they're quite willing to suggest it. We've covered this kind of stuff many times. Conference of Parties 27 was this the year climate progress unraveled. Climate progress. Imagine the hubris to think that you can change the weather because, like, on the scale we're talking about, they know, well, they don't think they can. They just want you to give them all the money so you have nothing left in your countries. And blame you, your tin cans, your pop bottles, and your cardboard for all the problems in the world instead of blaming the appropriate parties. The war in Ukraine has led to soaring energy prices. Now, we cover this almost every day, these types of headlines. No, the war didn't cause soaring energy prices. The idiotic, moronic embargoes from United Nations countries and NATO countries caused the embargo, or implemented the embargo, and by proxy caused the inflation in their own countries that destroyed the most impoverished in their countries. And they spend fortunes doing up stupid looking signs like this. More than 100 climate leaders. What the hell is a climate leader, folks? Share an open letter. Now, every time you hear something like that they share an open letter for world leaders, every time you hear something like that, it's never going to be good. It's always going to be incredibly sadistic. Oh, this is the World Economic Forum. All right, now this is Klaus Schwab. More than 100 CEO of companies, climate leaders. So that's the World Economic Forum gives out the marching orders to all of these people, and that's what you're looking at there. The global impact on food and energy prices due to the war in Ukraine. No, it's due to the embargo by countries that are at the whims of the World Economic Forum. Disgusting. It should be like, there's a politician in Canada that, if he gets elected, is going to make it a crime for anybody in the Canadian government to attend the World Economic Forum. because Klaus Schwab has been bragging that he has captured over half the parliament in Canada. Accelerating the transition to net zero, which is the disgusting Miles Allen. As members of the legions of CEO climate leaders, World Economic Forum is saying that they have to listen to these people is what they're doing. That's what that's actually all about. And they take it to a whole, they actually list these 100 on top of that. Here's the 100 people that the World Economic Forum says everybody got to go and kiss the ring of. These are evil. Their job is to destroy everything and everybody. That's their job. Their job is to do the opposite of what they're allegedly claiming they're going to do. Ocean Frontier Institute to call for ocean climate action. Ocean, which is the Dalhousie University. A delegation from Dalhousie hosted research center, the Ocean Frontier Institute, will attend Constipated Party 27 in Sharm El-Sheikh, Egypt. Now look at a picture below of somebody on a boat with binoculars. What, like, is that supposed to be stoic or something? They're on this great big stupid ship bombing around on the ocean? Or are they looking for a reactor 4 at Fukushima, I wonder? Now officially the building to the left, that doesn't exist. The official story is it looks like this, not like that. They're both the official picture. And so what you're seeing is all the media pretending Fukushima Reactor 4 is perfectly intact. This is just 4 of them. There's many more that done that. And the fuel pool they're claiming, they would be way above that and the one over there, the 2 fuel pools. With no containments that were splitting the atom before they melted down into the environment. There's the actual remains of the building. There's nothing left. And they hid that away from the population now for 11 years. 11 years of pretending that everything was hunky-dory and they got all the fuel out of it. 11 years. Why do you think they done that? Let me go backwards for a second. How nuclear kills fish. Now, this was Indian Point and another plant in New Jersey. But here's the different ways that each nuclear power plant slaughters fish. They have a devastating impact on surrounding fish populations. Environmental analysts in the 2 states of New Jersey and New York have found that the facility killed more than 17 billion large fish annually in New York and 9 large billion in New Jersey. There was the National Marine Fisheries Services found that the ones through the cooling systems are vacuuming up trillions of newly hatched fish, destroying them in the heat exchangers. These are the different ways that a plant kills fish. And that there's strong evidence that the decline in the fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destruction of baby fish than the overfishing of adults by commercial fleets. And that the Indian plant on the Hudson River sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily, killing about 2 billion juvenile and mature fish a year in the screens and the thermal plumes. And that Nuclear Regulatory Agency estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they're sucked into the 40-foot wide intake pipes. And this is just 2 nuclear plants they're talking about out of the hundreds on the planet, folks. These are mass genocide machines, right? So when Dalhousie is talking about Conference of Parties 27 and ocean climate action, well, after Fukushima meltdowns, we done research expeditions. By the way, that's the remains of Reactor 3. They deny it looks like that. The fuel pools, which would have been at the top of the building, and the reactor core are long gone. They denied that. So it's not just Reactor 4. They done it for Reactor 3 too. And think about this statement here. Doomsday-like radiation release. Doomsday-like radiation release of a fire in a pool at Unit 4. It would be a global catastrophe. So if this is fake, then that's the global catastrophe, right? Of radioactive fallout. Problem was, there was a lot more, right? It was Reactor 1, 2, 3, and 4. And even today, they call it a triple nuclear meltdown. They refuse to acknowledge that exists on top of that. So here was a model based on 6 years of emissions just into the ocean.
Maybe worse than thought. Studies from last year indicate that radioactive water will contaminate the entire Pacific Ocean in just 6 years. Kim Min-ji reports.
This graphic shows the gradual contamination of the Pacific Ocean due to leaks of radioactive water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant in Japan. The simulation, which was run by a German marine research institute, shows the entire Pacific waters being polluted by radioactive water in just 6 years.
So 6 years. Now, the problem was, this is a 16-day model of airborne. And you can see the ocean is completely, permanently, and the entire planet in 16 days is covered in radioactive fallout in just 16 days. So we launched research expeditions, Zoe. And the arrows are just a representation of the places where we've done research for 4 to 5 months a year, year after year after year, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. And what we discovered was an extinction event. Fukushima had wiped out all the species. To your left, they are permanently wiped out. These are before and after pictures. Dalhousie University refuses to acknowledge this. The species to your left, you'll never take those pictures again. That's an extinction event. We repeated the research expedition year after year, and the species didn't come back, which means it's permanent. So the pictures to the right are the after pictures, the post-Fukushima pictures. The pictures to the left is what it would normally look like. In 2011, that's what it looked like to your left. Within a couple of years, it all disappeared. And the number and the species we're talking about is stunning. It's actually stunning. And if that doesn't count, then what's the point of being on your planet? What's the point of calling yourself a human if you're not willing to acknowledge this kind of research? And this research, I was demonized for doing this. I was attacked. I was arrested. I was vilified in medias worldwide for going out and researching on my own. For going out and documenting it year after year to see if the species come back, and they didn't. And I've never stopped. You can attack me all you want, but I didn't do nothing wrong. I'm not a bad person for doing the research. And this cost me dearly to go out and do this research, including to my health. Japan, by the way, is growing food in a nuclear wasteland alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. 55 countries banned it from 14 prefectures for a decade. Canada lifted all restrictions after 93 days. The ultimate betrayal. The ultimate hate against everybody in Canada. And if you don't make a stand, it'll be you next. And your children and your loved ones and your friends and your families. Over 300 bootlicking journalists, media, and TV degenerates will cover the fake Constipated Party 27. Over 3,000 media idiots. The same ones who lied to you about Reactor 4 and Reactor 3. So what's the point of these? The point is they already proven they're evil, and they'll do whatever United Nations tell them because, by the way, which is sedition against the country they represent. There's no one to hold them accountable. We're it. The numbers include 2,800 fake journalists, correspondents, and photojournalists. But me doing this research, I'm not a photojournalist. I'm a terrible person for going out and researching it. But they're photojournalists if they go there and lick boots. Because that's all they're going to do. They're not going to be there to flush out reality. They're there to lick boots. Their job is to lick everybody's boots. That's their job, right? Is to regurgitate everything they're told and to lick everybody's boots. Don't upset anybody. That's their job. Their job is not to be arbiters of facts. So calling it, and these numbers do not include the 500 journalists from Egypt. You can't be a journalist in Egypt, for goodness sakes. It's too repressive of a country. Every time someone tries to be a journalist in Egypt, they show up dead. Egypt is bulldozing the UNESCO World, which UNESCO is United Nations, folks. Again, they've taken over your planet. They're truly the atomic plague. Egypt faces criticism over crackdown on the activists ahead of the Constipated Party 27. Like, the call it a climate summit this is 27 years it is. And, they're getting impatient. Now they feel like they should be running the countries. Remember the last show, Elon Musk and Bill Gates saying they should replace governments worldwide? Egypt faced criticism. From who? Fake criticism. But that's about it. There's not going to be any real criticism. Who's who at the Conference of Parties 27? The leaders who hold the world's future in their hands. That's an incredible statement. How the hell do they get to hold the world's future in their hands? At a non-elected organization, non-representative organization, which is a military-industrial complex, like, to write that kind of headline, imagine what kind of degenerate scumbag you actually got to be. Imagine what kind of disconnect you actually got to have to write a headline like that. Imagine how much you must hate every child on the planet so that 100 and 200 people that are politicians that shouldn't even exist at these types of meetings are the arbiters of everybody's future in the species. It's wrong. No matter how you look at this, it's very, very wrong. Who's who? And the leaders who hold the world's future. Well, if you want the answer to that, you got to go ask the World Economic Forum. 196 military-industrial complexes that are attending it. The UN Secretary General, who stepped up his rhetoric on climate crisis over the last year, warning of collective suicide. Well, collective suicide is putting our fate in the military-industrial complex known as UN, right? Australia will bid for 2026 climate summit. Australia. The media over in Australia is disgusting. It's revolting. The government in Australia is just insidious. I'll admit there's a couple there that have done the appropriate thing, like denounce nuclear, which is extraordinary for any country. Australia will bid for the 2020... What do you mean bid? Like Coca-Cola? Did Coca-Cola bid to be the sponsor? Do they get immunity for that too? Apparently. Why are they always in stupid suits? Don't they even care about themselves? If I dress in a suit, does that make me better than everybody all of a sudden? Apparently, to them it does. The Australian government will use the UN Climate Conference in Egypt to launch a bid with Pacific nations to host the 2026 summit. The useless summits. These are useless. This is year 27, accomplished nothing. 27 years of bamboozling the entire planet, and they still accomplished nothing. 27 years. I mean, that's the reality. Prove me wrong. Long-time observers say the push to bring up 20,000 people to Australia for a global climate change summit underscores a dramatic shift of tone. When I read that today, I blew up laughing. Or yesterday. I actually blew up laughing because I felt it was so ridiculous. It's not that ridiculous for Australia, the summit. It's just the whole thing is ridiculous. To host something that has no bite to it, no teeth to it. There's nothing going to come from it. Unless they just rob you of billions of dollars. But outside that, nothing. Could be a renewable energy superpower for the world if we just seize the opportunity. Australia got a perfect spot for tidal energy and geothermal and wind energy and solar power. They got endless deserts where they're not going to affect anybody. The only problem was United Kingdom detonated all kinds of nuclear weapons years ago. They have the highest cancer rates per 100,000. Australia waited for the wind to blow across, or United Kingdom waited for the wind to blow across Australia before they set off their nuclear weapons. King Charles III welcomes world leaders, environmentalists. It's absurd. Ahead of the Constipated Party 27 climate summit. King Charles. That's such a strange thing to say. I was hoping the Queen would live for another 15 years and Charles would die before she did. He's literally the worst one imaginable to be in that position. WSP and Canada environment industry leaders set to attend Conference of Parties 27. Canada environment industry. In other words, the goblins of the goblins. We must continue to work together in Canada and around the world to develop and deliver solutions, drive technology, and finance toward ambitious actions and effect a just transition to Miles Allen's net zero future. Net zero future is where you don't exist. That's net zero. It doesn't include the military, they're exempt. It doesn't include air, it's exempt. It doesn't include Coca-Cola, it's exempt. Drop Coca-Cola as Conference of Parties 27, Climate Summit sponsor, urges United Nations agitators. So anybody who disagrees with them is an agitator. At Conference of Parties 27, flood-battered Pakistan leads push to make polluting countries pay. Pakistan is one of the biggest polluters in the entire universe, for God's sakes. They dump so much garbage into the ocean, it's absurd. They got rivers in Pakistan where they dump so much nuclear waste, there's streets and streets of disfigured and disformed children. Amid historic flooding, the scientists say was supercharged. Scientists is another word for we hate your guts. Says was supercharged by climate change. Climate change is radioactive fallout. Decades and decades of radioactive fallout that never disappears. It's pulsing energy almost at the speed of light. It kills the fungus and the bacteria in your forest and everything, so the litter and the foliage doesn't break down. And when you finally get a lightning strike, the fires are just massive. The world is gearing up for a showdown over who should pay the cost. I mean, when you look at, I showed you earlier, when you look at the pictures from my research expedition because of Fukushima, who should pay the cost for that? Let's talk about the real cost for a change. The extermination of the entire Pacific Ocean's coastlines. How can you deny the documentation that took me years and years and years to compile from actual boots on the ground research expeditions? How can anybody deny that? And I was viciously hunted, assaulted, arrested, and attacked each year for going out and doing the research. I'm still constantly attacked even today. And the severity, like we got no more spiders in our forests on the East Coast. My apologies. Not much I can do about it. If I don't do that, I'll start talking like Donald Duck. That's the way it goes. I've been sick for 16 days. What a struggle. Like just being sick is what I'm talking about, right? I went out the weekend and I got, because I take a lot of minerals and vitamins and stuff like that. I went out and tried to buy a bunch of healthy food because I don't have taste anymore. I actually broke my diet today and had a handful of French fries, which I'm not supposed to be eating. It was amazing. After 6 weeks, I feel guilty, but it was amazing to eat a handful of French fries. I got quite a weakness for it, but in 6 weeks, I've never broken my diet a single time. And just eating healthy only, but I've been so sick I can't even eat. And so it feels good to finally get to this point where I can smile, get a few laughs in. But I've still got a ways to go, but I'm doing pretty good, I think, compared to the last couple of weeks. But really just Worried sick. 3 Cayman students head to conference parties 27 in Egypt. It should be illegal to let girls go there, right? It's a very dangerous place for girls and women. But 3 students, what, like, really? Their job is to go there and regurgitate what, I wonder? Otherwise, you would never make it into the media, right? At the youth sessions at the United Nations Climate Change Conference. At the youth sessions. Like, the United Nations really does have a fixation with children, right? And because they're not as scared as the children, see? If an adult says boo, they'll defecate in their pants. But if a child says boo, they'll smile. How's our poll going tonight? Will Conference of Parties 27 be about promoting dirty nuclear power as green again this year? We got 41 votes, 95% says yeah, sadly. Climate activists blocked private jet takeoff at Amsterdam airport. Hundreds of them were arrested by the military. Hundreds of protesters from Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion. And so Extinction Rebellion shows up out of nowhere. They don't protest nuclear or anything like that, thanks to what's her name? Stupid cow from United Kingdom from Environmental Progress. I can't remember. Greenpeace and Extinction Rebellion have teamed up. That's enough to make me want to throw up, the significance of it. Because they're both controlled opposition, right? Dutch arrested over 200 activists who stormed Amsterdam airport. Well, the airplanes are exempt. You got arrested and they still flew away. Hundreds of Extinction Rebellion and Greenpeace activists entered Amsterdam's airport on Saturday, cycling around private jets parking area and blocked the aircraft. The protesters have committed a criminal offense and they all get a slap on the wrist at best. What are they going to do? They're going to give 200 of them jail sentences and turn them into heralds for the movement, for the fake movement. Bo lost love. Boris Johnson has no plan to meet the new United Kingdom. Well, Boris got fired. It's not his rival. He got fired. What's he doing going to the Constipated Party 27 anyway? He lifted, one of the last things he done was lifted all restrictions on food from the nuclear wasteland with no checks and balances from 14 prefectures a couple of days before he got fired. And the government went ahead and kept those or allowed those restrictions to be lifted and poison everybody in the United Kingdom with bioaccumulation of radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland. He will address the summit on Monday, and last night said the climate battle was a moral good for the world. He's a moron, a very, very dangerous and deadly and lethal moron. He's the opposite of a human. He hates humans with a passion. He hates children with a passion. Host town gives Egypt a tight grip over protests. Well, you got to go through a tunnel to get there. Behind a postcard perfect appearance is a tightly controlled fortress in the Red Sea. Climate activists say the restrictions will discourage protests that have been a way for the public to raise their voices at past summits. Egypt is not a spot where you want to be protesting, folks. Local workers are prevented from speaking freely with visitors. So that can you imagine? The local workers are prevented from speaking freely with visitors. And in a country where protests are virtually banned, the government has set up a special venue for climate protests. Except no one is quite sure where it's at. And notifications are required 36 hours in advance. No one even knows where the protests are going to be. It'll be interesting to see tomorrow's headlines. A group of UN-appointed experts has expressed concern that the environment in Egypt will not be conducive to full and open participation. A group of UN-appointed experts. UN-appointed experts. Like the ones that said Fukushima was harmless. Those types of experts from UN. The same degenerate betrayal that we've seen from them every time they open their pie holes. Those experts. Why does the world let these people vomit all over them, I wonder? For decades, Sharm El-Sheikh has been the government's favorite spot for conferences, high-level summits, precisely because it's so easy to control. Isolated in the desert, near the southern tip, Sinai Peninsula, as it's often referred to, is a 6-hour drive from the capital, Cairo. Vehicles got to pass through a closely guarded tunnel under the Suez Canal, then numerous checkpoints along the highway, enabling the authorities to turn back those considered undesirable. Amnesty International researcher for Egypt and Libya called it a dystopia city. There's so much surveillance and so much control over who enters and who leaves the city, which is again an attempt to control who gets to speak to the international community that doesn't give a shit about them anyway. You can let all the activists in you want, the international community is not going to listen. They don't have a heart, for God's sakes. I don't even think they got blood. Hotel workers say security is particularly tight. All must obtain security clearances. And since Tuesday, they've been banned from leaving their places of work or housings. A police state. So United Nations can pretend they have some redeeming qualities. The Conference of Parties 27, and like to use the name COP, really? If that doesn't scream arrogant a-hole, what does, I wonder? It's taking place at Sham's large convention center, as in past Conference of Parties. Only official UN accredited delegates can enter the venue, known as the Blue Zone, which during the gathering is considered UN territory. So the conference party where they're having it is considered UN territory and subject to international law. Think about that statement. It's considered UN territory that has no sovereignty over any country, but has incredible privileges that is not afforded to anybody else on the planet. Another venue called a Green Zone is for business, youth, and civil society to hold events. Nobody knows where it's to, though. It remains unclear when protests are meant to happen. A government Conference of Parties 27 website says that besides the 36-hour notification for protest inside the venue, a 48-hour notice via email is required for protest outside it. Like, giving these people your email is one of the most dangerous things you can do. So they're having it in Egypt because they know Egypt is a repressive government. There's no other. Why would you put it there outside of that? You know, everybody but the accredited UN degenerates, everybody else is going to be shit on and harassed and stalked by this bully industry known as Egypt. The government has dispatched 500 taxis, all with cameras connected to a security observatory meant to monitor the driver's behavior. Just think about the incredible arrogance to do something like that. Think about the disconnect to actually do something like that. Probably one of the best stories is Justin Trudeau won't be at Conference of Parties 27. I apologize to everybody worldwide for what Justin Trudeau has done as a Canadian. I'm humiliated that he exists. And the political party that allowed him to come out and destroy our country should be charged with sedition. What he done is so evil, it defies any kind of logic. The Star reached out to activists and academics and capitalists and researchers. Except no one reached out to me. Few were willing to go on record explaining why, not wanting to be seen as impeding the global talks. What are you talking about, global talks? This is a UN meeting. This is about controlling the planet. This is not about doing good things for the planet. UN doesn't do good things for our planet. You got better chances of getting ran over by a unicorn than UN doing something good. Cops. What a disgusting thing to do is to name the COP. What a despicable thing to do. What an incredible betrayal. Don't deliver transformative change. The National Climate Program Manager at Environmental Defence here in Canada. Environmental defence has been around since 1984. We're policy experts, musicians, photographers, and bloggers, supported by scumbag scientists and degenerate business leaders and monstrous lawyers and community members working hard to protect Canada's environment. Yeah, you didn't open your mouth about Fukushima a single time, did you? Never open your pie holes a single time. Not one friggin' time. You didn't object after 93 days when Canada lifted all restrictions on food from a nuclear wasteland while 55 countries banned it in 14 prefectures. You never open your friggin' mouths a single time. You're the opposite of what you claim. Why is it always that way? Why do you hate us so much that you create organizations like this and try to tell everybody what to do, everybody what to think, everybody how to act? Your mission is to work with government and industry and individuals to defend clean water. Yeah, well, you would get rid of nuclear power plants in Ontario if that was true, wouldn't you? Climate chaos warning as UN summit begins. And of course they're going to say that. That's the point of it. The climate chaos is from radioactive fallout from 80 years of it. It's from 440 nuclear sites with over 1,000 fuel pools still splitting the atoms into the environment all day, and the majority of them are surrounded by farms. Evil is really easy to identify. It's impossible to get people to recognize it or acknowledge it for some reason. It's easy to lie. It's easy to screw over every species and every human. It's impossible to get these people to admit that nuclear fuel pools still splitting the atoms into the environment is a catastrophic event. It never goes away. BBC, every article on BBC in the last couple of days is how do we cut everybody's throat? Jimmy Savile is alive and well at the BBC, folks. Conference of Parties 27 Climate Chaos warning as UN summit begins. Climate chaos, if you look at the climate since Fukushima, you're going to see cyclones and hurricanes and typhoons constantly going above 200 miles per hour when they come on land. And you don't have any infrastructure with building codes for 200 mile per hour winds because we never seen it before Fukushima's nuclear meltdown. Fukushima was the tipping point. Decades and decades and decades of radioactive dumping, radioactive fallout from fuel pools and nuclear testing and everything else, and then have multiple fuel pools melt down, 8 fuel pools melt down, and 4 reactors. And there's a lot of evidence suggests that the common spent fuel pool in Japan melted down. Their evidence, not mine, but theirs. To submit new climate action plans to the United Nations. Why would you submit anything to the United Nations? Why don't you get a real organization? Why don't you get rid of this disgusting parasite, this plague known as UN? Eisenhower called a military-industrial complex. How can these people ever look in a mirror? It's criminal. There'll be hundreds of events over the 2 weeks with exhibitions, workshops, cultural performances from youths. It'll be like the jester, the clowns for the king and queens, see? That's all we are to them. We're the clowns and they're the kings and queens. They're not in reality, but that's what they act like, and that's what they feel like, and that's what they try to portray themselves. Kick off with a deal to discuss climate compensation. Like, the nuclear industry is this planet's swan song. Arrest and curbs on protests as Conference of Party 27 nears. Unlawful surveillance cameras, restrictions on participation. And we cover almost all of it. It's just... So hopefully by tomorrow now we'll get some fresh stories coming out. Because all of this is leading up to it, right? And today is day 1. And Conference of Parties 27 gets off to a delayed start after tussle over agenda for talks. Tussle. 196 countries with 45,000 people and 120 world leaders will attend. What do you mean world leaders? For how long? Till next year? Because somebody else will be leading the country at that point instead of them, right? They're the last people that you want to be put in positions of authority because they got nothing to lose. They walk away from their job within a year or two. World Health Organization, which is United Nations. Health must be at the front and center of the Conference of Parties climate change negotiation, and they show you a forest fire as if they've never had one before. It's the first fire humanity's ever had, folks. Canadian support for climate change initiative legs. Canadian support for climate change initiatives. Well, it should be Canadian support for United Nations legs. Why should Canada support United Nations? They're the military-industrial complex. All they've done is hurt us. All they've done is destroyed us. All they've done is act like thugs. So why should anybody participate in United Nations? Alberta oil and gas industry prepares. Now remember last year there were several thousand lobbyists also went there, right? Don't think this year is going to be any difference. Boris Johnson to attack corrosive. Why is Boris Johnson being quoted? One of his last things he done was lifted all the restrictions on food from a nuclear wasteland. One of the most evilest things imaginable. No referendum, no academics, no science, no universities, no testing, no nothing. Just shaking a hand and removing all restrictions and flooding United Kingdom supermarkets with food from a nuclear wasteland so everybody ends up starting to bioaccumulate it and ultimately ends up sick in the next year or two. You know, I apologize because I care. And that makes me a bad person. That makes me a weirdo because I care. That makes me trouble because I care. I care that you and your loved ones don't poison yourself because of degenerates like this have made it easy for you to poison yourself or made it impossible for you not to poison yourselves. I absolutely, unequivocally despise Japan for what they done. I absolutely despise them, the cowards, the human trash, the traitors that they are, the incredible cowards that they are, the unbelievable cowards, the hideous cowards that they actually are. These are incredible, despicable cowards for what they've done to our planet. By growing food in a nuclear wasteland and shipping it constantly worldwide. Work like a dog, and we got 39 thumbs up. Work like a dog and put this together for days. And we got 123 views total. That won't even show up after the video. Work like a dog. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year after year after year after year after year. Just because nobody else is out there being honest. And I feel like a weirdo because I'm honest. I actually understand that being honest means you're an actual weirdo in most people's eyes. Because you don't regurgitate the lies. You try to have a conversation. That means you're a weirdo. You're treated that way and you're despised. You're feared and scorned because you're honest. I mean, that's the reality. I'm feared and scorned because I'm honest, not because I do all the work and I'm showing the documentation to back up all of my assertions. No, that makes me a weirdo. Well, you're honest. What are you doing, Dana? You can't be honest. In a world of endless lies, how can you be honest? I hear you loud and clear. We got 43 votes. It's 95% of the people. And we'll see over the next 13 days, because this is day one, will Conference of Parties 27 be about promoting dirty, despicable disease factories known as nuclear power plants as green again this year. We got 43 votes. It's a resounding yes. We're going to end the poll right there. We raised 130 on the weekend from James Lucid. Thank you, James. And I asked Colette to, she shouldn't have donated. And because she can't really afford it, and I felt bad about it. So see everybody tomorrow night. Tomorrow night I think is a Fukushima show. Don't quote me on that. Depends on how much news shows up tomorrow, right? On conference of parties between the night and tomorrow. I might do another conference of parties 27 tomorrow night. Oh. MK Greta. It's 100% right, James. It's a reference to MK Ultra, MK Greta. It's so sad, right? But that's exactly it. She's the perfect puppet. Industry got total control. I'm not going to try to do a shout out. I'm so plugged up here. We'll just call it a night. And how did we do anyway? We done pretty good. That's almost a 2 hour. Thank you, Colette. I had problems with your donation. Because normally I can transfer it right away. And I couldn't. And I don't know what's going on. I've never had a problem before, so maybe it's just something on my end. I never checked back. I'll let you know though if there is an issue tomorrow night or something, right? Robert, Albert, Tinker, good night everybody. Colette, John. I'm not going to try to shout out everybody. Dana Nasana, that's what I was looking for, a quick shout out. For moderating, hopefully everything went good tonight. Angels Place, Port Angeles, John Shiflett, maybe I will. Jeff Poor, Nancy Sands. Just a quick one. Obsolete Optics, James Lucid. Good night, everybody. Jeff Poor, I think I showed it out already. Timber Traveler, Thinker. Yeah, I'm gonna just stop right here. I'm starting to overheat here, so we'll call it a night. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night tonight. Great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. I already got a nuclear show good to go, and it's a good one too. I'd like to do another conference of parties. Thanks, Colette. As far as I know, because normally I can transfer it right away, it wouldn't let me do it. It said withdrawn. I've never seen that before, and so I didn't do that, right? It shouldn't do it on its own, and it didn't acknowledge that it went to my bank either, so I don't know. I'll know tomorrow night though. And Darlene, good night everybody. Robert, Albert, anybody I missed, my apologies. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. And thank you, everybody, for all the well wishes over this last couple of weeks. I am feeling better. Still got a ways to go, but we're good enough to do battle again. Take care, folks. Darlene, you shouldn't send people away from my site. I work like a dog to get people to stay on my site. That's twice you've done that to me now. I don't come to your site and do it to you. I don't know why people do that to me. Work like a dog in the hopes they will stay on my site and watch something else, and people try to send them somewhere else. I've never done that on another site. I've never ever tried to drag people away from people that work like a dog. What do you mean after? There is no after. The idea was to get people here in the first place. It's wrong to do that to me. I work like a dog to get people here. You don't understand that that's wrong? You don't understand how many years I've been doing this? And what do I got, 40 people on my show? You're going to send them somewhere else?